personnel, thank you very much. Will y'all give it up for your own hometown representative? Madam President, you turn out the House. You know how to turn out the House, and I want to thank you and the Democratic Executive Committee and all of the associated clubs and organizations that frankly thought it not robbery to spend, a Saturday afternoon together. We got up real early this morning and drove down from Tallahassee. But it's all good. Y'all are that important. I mean that. We have the Legislative Black Caucus had their gala last night, and we've had a number of folks, organizations coming from all around the state to try to put their imprint on what is happening in Tallahassee by way of the legislative session. And the councilman had it completely correct. Tallahassee, under the Republican leadership that we've had to endure now for 20 years, on hyper steroids when it comes to taking and stripping power away from local communities. Now, mind you, this is the party that says that, well, Tip O'Neill gave us all politics are local. But their talking points would also suggest that the best form of government, the best form of people participation is government that happens at the local level. They forgot the asterisk, which is unless they're in power, right? Because I've been involved for the last 2 years, and then I'll get to what are my remarks I should be giving. But I got to share this with you because it exclamation marks and underlines what the fight has been for us at the local level now that Republicans have taken control of the Capitol. I've been involved in a 2-year lawsuit with the Attorney General Pam Bondi. Yes, cue the hissing. Pam Bondi, the NRA, the Second Amendment Foundation, and Florida Carry, because we have an ordinance in our city that we failed to repeal, that we refuse to repeal, which says you cannot fire a gun in a city park. Don't say anything about carry. We say you cannot shoot a gun in a park where our kids play and our families picnic. And that used to be common sense. It used to be common sense, and now it's radical, according to the special interest group who make their money, their profit off of the proliferation of weapons in the hands of every single person, regardless of whether or not they should be qualified to carry or discharge one. So we've been standing firm, but guess why they can sue us? They can sue us because Florida law, vis-a-vis the Republican leadership, circa 2011, passed a preemption law that said no local government can create any laws impacting guns. The carry, the sale, the distribution, the use, any of it. And they said if the lawmaker votes at the local level to do that, that lawmaker can be personally sued. They can be personally fined up to $5,000 individually. They cannot be represented by their government. They must attain personal legal counsel to defend them. They can be responsible for reimbursing attorney's fees of the opponent up to $100,000, and that they can be subject to removal from office at the discretion of the governor of the state of Florida. That's law in the state of Florida under Republicans. A lot of folks don't know about that's law in the state of Florida. It is what we have described as super preemption. And so we beat them once at the circuit court, we beat them again at the appellate court, and we told them we'll take it to the Supreme Court. Because it is the right thing to do, and unfortunately, y'all, we have kowtowed and surrendered far too often to the powerful gun lobby, a group that represents fewer than 5% of American people, yet they seem to run roughshod over our decision making, not only here in the state of Florida, but at the federal level as well, and time is out for it. But we need Democrats, we need people, common sense, decent thinking people to stand up and say no. Enough is enough. It is not radical to say you cannot shoot a gun in a city park. It is not, and I don't care how many times they say that it is, it isn't. Nobody wants to take away your right to legally carry.
Marco Rubio, #1.
But we do have a problem with war weapons. Weapons of war. That's what weapons who snuff out the lives of 30 people in a few seconds are. Right? The same weapon that was used to snuff out the lives of those precious, innocent children in Sandy Hook. And you would have thought that it would have been enough to see small, innocent, little dead body after dead body and casket after casket of our babies right dead center in front of us would be enough to compel us to move on some common sense gun law reform. Yet, this issue has seemed almost unmovable because of the opposition of one, the extreme right, but two, of the money interests who make money off of the weapon proliferation here in civilized society. And we've had enough, which is why we said we'll take them on in court, we'll take them on in the court of public opinion, and when it comes time, we'll reverse this thing and we'll sue them. Yeah. Because their rights to own and carry and discharge a weapon should not trump my right to ensure the safety and the security of my family, of my precious children, as we play in a park. Yeah. It doesn't make sense and it isn't right? And we got to stand up and say so. Yes. Yeah. So I got off subject. But I want you to know that I'm running for governor of the state of Florida. And I also want you to know that this is not a fool's errand, right? That this is actually something that's achievable, that a Democrat can win again in the state of Florida. But I'll tell you right now, that's right, we can win. We cannot win the state of Florida by pretending to be Republicans. Yes. Okay? When we run our races, when we run for office, we have to run with the full conviction that our agenda is actually better for people. Yeah. Right? That we're actually the party and the folks that are out there working and standing in the gap for working people, for middle class people, for business owners, regardless of your side of the ledger. That we're standing on principle and on behalf of what's right, and we cannot surrender and shrink from the opportunity to get out there and tell people what it is we believe in. Not by apologizing for who we are or for what it is that we stand for, but by standing firmly on it. That we're a party that believes that every child ought to have an opportunity to learn. Every child. Regardless of what part of the town you live on, where you come from, what your mama or your daddy did. That you ought to have access to a good, strong quality education. We also have to be willing to call out what these last 20 years of failure around our public education system has been. And the failure largely lies in the fact that we have a political party and a political system that is intent on taking out every bit of resource that they can find away from the public system and put it into the private system. The private system that enriches their friends and their donors, right? The folks they get to play golf with, and the rest of us suffer in that process. We become a state that is largely intent on teaching to the test and high-stakes testing. Never mind that these tests don't tell us what our kids know. It tells us how well they take a test. And they camouflage it under this language of accountability. Well, you know what? I grew up in a system in this state where we had accountability in education, and it didn't require the high-stakes testing and our kids being on anxiety medication in order to take those tests because of what those tests foretell of their future. That is a lie, and we have to call it what it is. And not only that, this hyper-focus on the privatization of the public education system has also meant the pushing out of our kids from the normal system, right? Because of these tests, we have kids that are literally making the choice that they might as well drop on out. Right? Well, I grew up in a system in this state, and I believe that this one that we can return to, where we had teaching and loving professionals who were in front of you, who were literally doing the hardest job I think exists on earth, and that is the shaping and the molding and the inspiring of our most precious contribution, our children. Our most precious contribution. That these individuals in many ways are the ones who spend more times awake hours with our kids than sometimes we get to spend. Right? And so we don't incentivize them in this work by calling them evil. We don't incentivize them by calling our schools failure factories. We disincentivize them when we say to our most experienced teaching professionals that if they go to the most challenged of teaching environments and that school doesn't have year-over-year improvements in the way that the state says they should, that they're going to deduct money from that teacher's salary. That's what exists in this state. It's a disincentive for the most experienced teaching professionals, the same teaching professionals that we want to be in the classrooms with our most challenged teaching environments. We disincentivize them from doing so. What happens if you flip the script? It said that if our most experienced and best teaching professionals go to our most challenging environments, we'll give you a bonus and a stimulus on your check. Right? That we have to wrap around the kind of support that we know our children need. And if I'm governor, I'm going to tell you what we do. First, we begin earlier. Because between the ages of 0 and 5, the most development in the human brain takes place between the ages of 0 and 5. 90% of the brain is developed by the time your kid reaches 5. 90% our kids are literally sponges. They're taking it in. I know this. I got a set of twins at home. 3-year-olds almost come back. And I'm watching them. I see them. I know what they push back out at us. I know how they regurgitate words that they hear from us. And because of the way we use them, they begin to understand context. Right? So that when they begin kindergarten ready to learn. So we've got to expand access to high quality early childhood education in this state. We've got to expand access to it. It's very difficult for working families to afford to be able to put their children into high quality early childhood centers. And we've got to bring that barrier down because you know what? It's an investment that pays off. If our kids are beginning kindergarten ready to learn, then they're more likely to be reading on grade level by the time they reach 3rd grade. And we ought to make that commitment that 100% of our kids by the time they get to 3rd grade are on grade level reading. But that process doesn't begin at kindergarten, it begins before that point. The 30 million word gap is real. The difference between low-income kids and upper-income kids is literally 30 million more words that are known and that are heard by a high-income child or a kid who lives in a high-income household than that lives in a low-income household. 30 million. And so we wonder when Johnny gets to grade school why he is ducking and hiding and jiving when question time comes around. You ask about skiing, he can't answer. He doesn't know what a ski is, a snow lift is, because he has no context for what's coming out of the teacher's mouth. And that begins before they get to kindergarten, y'all. And then by 3rd grade, we need to ensure their own grade level reading. And the other thing we've got to do is make sure that when they get to high school, and some of y'all may be able to relate to this, but I know when I was going through, we had the trades being taught in K through in 9th through 12th grade. We had shop, we had wood shop, we had mechanical, we had electrical. So that if you were not on the college bound track, you got a skill that you could monetize, go to work and take care of yourselves and your families. It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. And we made the trade something that folks are supposed to be embarrassed about, right? That we don't have apprenticeships anymore. And what I propose is that we have apprenticeships 2.0. You need to know how to operate a computer if you're going to be a mechanic. You need to know about that. Why? Because every car coming off of the assembly line has a computer in it to diagnose what the problem is. But you still need human life right now. And I know the day is coming, right? Computers are coming, they're already here. Right? And that's something we've got to plan for, but we can build an economy in this state that makes a way for those skills to have more use, for you to be able to earn a decent and a livable wage, and actually better than that in the trades. These are jobs that I know are paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 off of 6 and 8 months and 12 months of training. So why are we making it a disincentive for folks to go on and get the skills that they need to then monetize and get good work in this state? We have to refocus on that, and the 9th through 12th grade again in this state. And guess what else? For those kids who are college bound, we have to make sure that they have what they need to go off into the community college system or into the higher education system and get a degree, graduate without being under a mountain of debt in this state. Right? Y'all know young people just as I do who are literally taking semester off and then going, taking semester off, spending 7, 8 years to get through because they're having to pay as they go, right? Because the interest rate on some of these private sector loans are so incredible. You heard the President Obama, he was just paying off his student loans after he got his book, several $1 million book deal, right? So we know that this is a challenge, not just in our state, but across the country, and we ought to lean into that. I've been in the shadow of the Capitol now for almost 15 years as an elected official, and I've watched what has happened in Tallahassee. And y'all have watched closely our governor, who tells us he's not a scientist. Y'all didn't, he didn't have to remind us of that. We knew that much. But because he isn't a scientist, he says he can't wade into whether or not global warming and climate change is real. Never mind that on a non-rain day, in Miami Beach, Collins Avenue gets closed down because of high tide. Not a rain event, but a natural occurrence.
That's right.
So we don't have to litigate whether or not it's real. It's showing up in our city streets already. What would happen if we had a governor who said, you know what? The majority of the state of Florida is below sea level. Climate change is real. Sea level rise is real. I'm going to put together a package, an assemblage of scientists and experts who can teach us the investments we need to make Florida a more resilient state. I feel strongly about it, not only because it's necessary, because the impacts are already showing up, but think about the economy and the jobs we can create just off of addressing that challenge. Yeah. The construction worker goes to work, the engineer, the scientist, the architect goes to work raising ground levels, building pumping stations, making sure water is not a threat to people or property. Yeah. There are jobs in that, and I would assure you there are good jobs in that. We have a governor who disagrees with Barack Obama when Obama was president, right? And said that, you know what, I don't believe in stimulus, so you take your $1 billion and send it to another state, right? When the president tried to send $1 billion to help us build high-speed rail to help make us a 21st century state with 21st century infrastructure. But because the governor and the Republicans were so dug in, they sent that money back to Washington, D.C. Never mind that the state of Florida and the taxpayers of Florida send more money to Washington, D.C. than we bring home. But they sent it back. That was a failure on two levels. One, we had an opportunity to build high-speed rail in the third largest state in all of America, and we didn't do it. We shrunk from that challenge, and shame on us for doing so. But it's also a shame because, secondly, those are jobs. Good jobs that put people to work at every level of the income run, right? And so what we need is a governor who understands, one, that you can't be so ideologically bound that you close your eyes to the opportunities that enrich your state and the people that are in it. We have a governor who calls himself the jobs governor, yet celebrates the fact that he only brings low-wage work into the state. That 46% of the people in the state are working at jobs that are below livable wages. We also have a governor who is so ideologically bound that when we had an opportunity to insure 1.5 million of the most medically needy people in this state, he said, no way. Go figure it out on your own. I did 2 roundtables, one in Broward County and one in Miami-Dade, where I got to sit down with healthcare navigators, the folks who are responsible for getting as many people enrolled on ACA as they possibly can. And they tell us the stories of heartbreak of folks who are literally the working poor. These people aren't sitting on somebody's couch waiting to collect something. They're out there working to provide a way for themselves and for their families. But because of the fact that we didn't extend Medicaid for them, they can't get access to health care. And so they get their health care in emergency rooms, never mind that is the most expensive and least efficient form to access health care. It's like all of us driving our cars into the ground, never getting our oil changed, never changing out the battery, never maintaining it, right? Y'all, anybody who's had car trouble knows it is so much more expensive when you wait too late. And that's what the emergency room is equivalent to. The expensive and least productive form of service. By the time you get to emergency room, or by the time you take that car to fix that major problem, they're going to tell you got 20 more problems you got to fix. And healthcare is the same way. By the time you show up in the emergency room, you got 20 more problems that you have to fix. Or medication you're not going to have to be subscribed to that you, by the way, cannot afford. It's inhumane in a country and in a state as wealthy, as prosperous as we are, for folks not to have access to life-saving health care. Maintenance in health care. It's wrong. I've got to tell you what's more wrong about it is the fact that that money, that 90% that the federal government would pay, it's not like it's not being spent. That money is being reallocated to other states. It's being reallocated. Money that should be coming here into the state of Florida is being reallocated to Texas and California and even Kentucky and Ohio, where they have Republican governors who had the good wisdom to take it, to expand the program and create access for the people in their state. They're Republicans, but they were not so ideologically bound that they they couldn't see the need to respond to the needs of the people in their communities. That's what this is about, the ability to respond to the needs of the people who live here. We can do better, y'all. And if I'm governor, we're going to do better here in the state of Florida. I assure you. We're going to do better. We're going to bring that money home to Florida because it's ours. We deserve it. It's ours. Y'all, we live in the state of Florida. And I just wish we had a governor who said that because we live in the Sunshine State, that we're going to be the capital of solar energy in the United States. It's a no-brainer. We're the Sunshine State. We ought to be contributing solar. And guess what else about solar? If you're going to build a solar farm or a solar field or put a solar panel on a roof, you got to send a man or a woman up there to put that on there. Those are not jobs you offshore. Those are jobs that exist right in the communities where we live. Good paying jobs that put people to work, but it also reduces our dependency on non-renewables. And this is an issue for all of our communities. Because if you're a poor community, where do they put the most damaging parts of infrastructure? Whether it's a coal plant, right? Most polluting of instruments, they almost always end up next to poor areas, poor neighborhoods, and poor communities. And so this is not just an issue for the high-minded environmentalists. These are the issues for the asthma mother, right? For the folks who almost always seem to be burdened with all of the most damaging parts of our public infrastructure system. I haven't heard of anybody getting asthma off of their closeness to renewable like solar. Right? I haven't heard that. Bad air quality. Haven't heard it. Right? So those are good jobs, and those are the kind of jobs that we need here in the state of Florida. And we can get there, y'all. But we gotta have spine, and we gotta be willing to stand up to people who have an agenda that isn't ours. And I believe it is the majority agenda of the people of this state. We've got to give the majority a voice again and how this state moves forward and how it runs. Because for too long, the folks who get to decide are the ones that are well connected and well heeled. And the rest of us get the burden of it. The rest of us get to live under the burden of it, and we can do better. I didn't share biographically, but I tell you, I'm one of 7 kids to my mother, number 5 and 7, all boys and 1 girl. Yeah, no, she's tough. All boys and 1 girl. My baby sister, she's the last one. I'm so proud of her. She actually works for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Looking at the intersection of the criminal justice system and how it impacts the lives of our young people who, all too often in Alabama where she works, and now increasingly in Florida she's doing work, but we know this issue all too well of our young people being over-prosecuted and prosecuted as adults, interrupting their life trajectory, right? Putting a stop to their very potential. And well, don't get me started on the 1.6 million people who have had their civil rights taken away. 1.6 million of them. Which is why I led the effort in Tallahassee to ban the box, where we no longer ask the question about your criminal background history unless answering yes to that question disqualifies you for the job. Right? We got some limited positions where you can't work if you've got a criminal background history, but the vast majority of them you can. And there is a difference between checking a box that says, I've committed a crime before, when compared to you and me being able to sit with each other and I'm being able to ask you, have you ever had an interaction with the criminal justice? You say, yeah, Mayor Gillum, I have. But you know what? I got a family to live for, a child to take care of, a wife or a girlfriend that I may want to marry one day. And if you give me this shot, I promise not to disappoint you. That's a different relationship. We have something, as y'all know, that says double jeopardy, which means you cannot be tried twice for the same crime. Yet our system allows you to be punished perpetually for a mistake. It's a life sentence if I just heard something. And that's not right in a civilized society. And most states have gotten hip to it. They changed those Jim Crow era laws that are intended to disenfranchise people. They've changed those laws to make way for redemption and opportunity and people to make again a good way for themselves. And so I feel strongly about that issue, and I believe we've got to readdress what it means to give people the opportunity to pull themselves up. That's all we're talking about is opportunity. Not giveaways, not handouts, but opportunity. I said this my first time I ran for office in Tallahassee. I was 23 years old running citywide for the city council. And I was fortunate to live in a community that was forgiving enough to elect a 23-year-old to be over a nearly $1 billion budget. Right? But I always, my campaign ad said a chance. And I said a chance because that's all my parents ever asked that I get. They just need a chance. And that's what most people need. They just need a chance. And yet we've created systems to prevent them from being able to get access to that chance, whether it's education, or a good paying job, or access to health care. They just need a chance. And we ought to give people a chance again. I know this too well. Having grown up with my mother being a school bus driver, when Florida got rid of summer schools, she became a presser and a dry cleaner. Pulling down on that heavy equipment. She'd be disappointed my crease is not strong enough. Real big about creases. She still creases her jeans, y'all. Real strong on those creases. My daddy was a construction worker, and they would get up very, very early in the morning and pack us all into a car and drive us over to my grandparents' house, where my grandmother would let us sleep a little bit longer during the day, but then she'd get us up and get us ready for school. And before she sent us out, she had a ritual. She'd take her bottle of olive oil and twist off that top and dip it over into her finger and take the residue of that olive oil and build a cross on our forehead. It was her day of our way of sending us out in the day with a blessing, letting the world know that we were covered. And then she would say, boy, go to school. Mind your teachers. Get your lesson. And one day bring it home. Amen. She said, bring it home for your little brother and your little sister who don't know what it is. Bring it home. Bring it home for that little boy down the street that you play with. God knows where he gonna end up. Bring it home. She said, bring it home for your mama and your daddy who get up every day to go work on somebody else's job, to keep a roof over your head and clothes on your back and food on the table. Bring it home. I didn't know then, but I would later learn what my grandmother was communicating to me is that I was responsible for more than just myself. That I was responsible too. To know I was responsible to my brother and my sister and that boy down the street that I played with who she didn't even like. I was responsible to my mother and my father and the work of my grandparents and the prayers that were prayed for me and my community. It was a sense of the collective, that we were all in this thing together, all of us. That if I went far, we all went far. If I did good, we all did good. That is a value that is so deeply steeped in the democratic set of values. I actually think it's pretty American. That we gotta care for one another and lift each other up and provide opportunity and access, and that if all of us, if I did good and a group of us did good, the community could do good. People don't find themselves hopeless. They're not inspired. They're not there shooting each other because they don't believe they have a reason to live. That somebody cares about them and cares for them and is willing to make sure that they got a way too, a way out, a way in, a way up. And we've lost a great sense of that, y'all. And I believe that it shouldn't be that difficult to find and reconnect with and help people reconnect with it again. It's possible. In fact, I had a preacher once preach a sermon that had everybody pull out a piece of paper and spell out impossible. P-O-S-S-I-B-L-E, impossible. And then he said, take the I and put an apostrophe and then the M and separate the M from the P. And what does that spell? Impossible. I'm possible. And if I'm possible and my run for governor is possible, then y'all are possible too. And our kids are possible too. And the future of our state is possible. We're in this together. Our state has suffered too long under these last 20 years of leadership that doesn't seem to see everybody anymore. They don't see everybody anymore. And we got to see people again and let them know that we do see them and that we see them, and then the policies begin to reflect that we see their lived experience and that we're going to work on their behalf to stand in the gap until we get it right and we all get up, right? And unfortunately, Republicans have been able to survive by reminding all of us of all the things that we have different from one another. They want us to stay focused on the superficial differences: race, age, how much you make, where you come from, the last name. That's how they win, by keeping us all separate, out of the same rooms, out of the same conversation, from talking to each other. As mayor, I started an effort in Tallahassee called The Longest Table. And we're now on our 4th iteration of The Longest Table. And it was my effort to break down some of the barriers where people who lived in different parts of the town didn't understand why we were, as a city council, appropriating certain money to certain areas. Because that wasn't their experience. They didn't know that it existed. So let's create a dialogue. So we created a long table, shut down the street in Tallahassee and downtown, inviting the community out to have supper, to break bread together. We had over 850 people show up to break bread together. A cross-section of our community, all different types, from all different places. And we ran a runner down the middle of the table, all the way down the middle, with thought bubbles about poverty and crime and what are the aspirations of us as a city, where do we want to go, right? And it was amazing. People talked. They ate. And they exchange stories. It's not utopic. We still have our problems, but we're willing to sit down and talk and not allow our superficial differences to keep us divided. Right? We can do that. So I'll wrap up and take questions, but I wanted to share that with y'all because that's exactly how I plan to run this campaign. I'm gonna go everywhere, all 67 counties, every city there is, right? Because that's how we win. We have a saying along with The Longest Table that says, instead of being judging, choose to be curious. Right? If our default setting was, instead of saying, well, such and such and such and such and such, we asked a question in that. And we're choosing to be curious about what's different from us. Right? And so we got to go those places that we think we can't win anymore and listen a little bit. Hear what folks have to say and then reflect back to them. And you know what? I believe that in the conversation, there may be some things we agree with each other on. Right? If we just take some time to listen and to hear. I sat on a plane the other day leaving Washington, D.C. During Trump's inauguration, the day before, and I was sitting next to a guy who is a contractor. He builds sets, set designs, and so he had worked on the Trump preparation. I try not to judge that. But we sat next to each other. He lives outside of Atlanta in a suburban area, and he was, the Delta commercial for safety came on, the safety video. And in the video, it was very representative and reflective of diversity. The pilot was a woman. Each of the flight attendants were from a different country, and the chyron said the name of the country and the name of the person. And he looks at it, he looks at me, he points and says, "What's that about? You ever fly on a plane with that?" You know, now, first thing, my reaction was, now, what about me gave this guy permission to think that I might be in agreement on this? I'm still trying to figure out what that was. But I sat there and I listened to him, and he sort of carried on. He said a couple of other things. He talked about where his kids would go to school and how his school is full of Latinos, and he's not sure where they come from because in his neighborhood there are not a lot of Latinos. And I'm listening to him and I'm thinking, and I'm like, man, this guy is describing, there's a lot here. But honestly, what's going on is that this man sees the world changing at a pace that he can't even follow. I'm not making allowance for it. I disagree wholeheartedly. But I tried to listen to what was being said through all of the vitriol, which was probably unintentional. He was expressing himself. But he's seeing a world that's changing at a pace that he can't imagine anymore. So we kept on. Honestly, I changed the subject, trying to get on higher ground. Like, I got kids too. What do they like to play with? And when we landed, I gave him my card and he gave me his, and my card says Mayor of Tallahassee. And I see something happens with him, but I don't say anything, and he doesn't say anything. So we leave. Well, I get an email next morning, and the subject line is, "You must think." And I open it up and it says that I'm an idiot. He says, I Googled you, and I just want you to know I'm so proud of you. And then if you ever find yourself in the Atlanta area, I hope you'll call me up and we can get a beer. And the outcome could have been a lot different had I not found a different default button. There was another one I could have pushed instead of pulled back on there. But y'all, I'll tell you this much, you're going to find a candidate in this race on the Democratic side or the Republican side who's going to work harder for this thing. I'm going to get out, I'm going to go everywhere, I'm going to talk to everybody, because running a race in the state of Florida is not the Electoral College. You don't win orange and lose Osceola and somebody wins. The person who will be the next governor will be the one who gets one more vote than the other man. That's right. One more vote. And that means you got to go everywhere you get. And so we're going to do that. We're going to go, we're going to beat down doors, we're going to go as hard as we can. We're going to raise, hopefully, the resources to allow us to compete in this race and to then get our message out. And hopefully that there'll be enough people who say, you know what, you could be the standard bearer for our party. Yeah. And then there'll be enough people, that 70,000, that 1% difference between who becomes governor and who doesn't in this state of 20 million people, that's roughly been the differential. 70,000 voters have decided who the governor would be. That includes 2 elections where we were outspent by over $100 million. Only 70,000 people decided. And guess who was missing? A lot of us, our voters, our base. So we can just get 100 more thousand of us who are registered, who are inclined to vote, who understands what it means to vote, to show up, we win. And there are more of us than there are. I'm going to take y'all's questions. I just want to thank you for the opportunity. I thank you for the chance, right? A chance to compete. The chance to compete. And that's all I've ever asked for, was a chance. And I'm going to stand by my record and what we've done. I've got 15 years of voting and of stances and of positions, and I plan to answer for all of it, right? You don't have to trust me and believe. You can look at the past and see what I've done, where I've stood up, and the fact that I've never shrunk from one of those arguments, right? We stood up to it. When the governor said that Syrian refugees were not welcomed in Florida, never mind, he didn't have the power to say he was welcomed and who isn't into this country. He took liberty, so I took some too. I said, come to Tallahassee where they're welcome. And the reason why is because our values matter, not when it's easy, but when it's hard. When people are afraid and insecure and are uncertain. It's hard, but that's when your values show up. No, they got to be consistent, right? The president all of a sudden has a value around refugees and the attacks on them, apparently. Yeah, he closes off the borders into this country to people who are being pushed out, persecuted, fired on. That ain't consistent values. It's opportunistic. And we're going to pay the price for it. So we got to be consistent. When marriage equality was won in this country, and we had clerk after clerk saying that they would no longer issue marriage licenses to any couples, I said, come to Tallahassee where we believe love is love. When the rhetoric on the right got to hyperbolic phase and they were calling immigrants in this country illegals, I stood up and said, illegals isn't a noun, right? Not a noun. People can't be illegals. People are people. But the reason why they use that language is because if we can forget that people are people, then we can do anything to them. We don't have to care anymore when people are people. So we have to stop that rhetoric. We have to stand up to that rhetoric. It's not right. When some people will question whether or not you can believe like I believe and still win, I believe you can run on what you believe and win today in this state. Not shrink from it, not be embarrassed about it, not obfuscate on it, but run toward what you believe. And I believe there are enough people out there who believe like us that we can win. All right? So I'm going to stop and I'll take your questions. We got first, and we've got a microphone here so everybody can hear the questions.
We have voter registration in the back if you need to get either register to vote or to update your voter registration. Madam, right back there. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam President.
Hi, my name is Denise, and I want to ask you about affordable housing.
Yes.
I read in the Tampa Bay Times the other day that the state's housing fund gets rated on a constant basis. And we have an affordable housing crisis in Florida and in St. Pete at this time. And it's a very important issue to me. I'm on disability and I don't make a lot of money. And I know a lot of people that are in the same situation. And so I think it's something that really needs to be, really needs to be, okay.
I believe your question is whether or not, what my position is.
What your position is on affordable housing.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I know these, thank you for your question, and this issue of affordable housing is not just one y'all have here in St. Pete. We've got it in Tallahassee, and there was a story out of the Miami Herald that talked again about the push-out effect, that it's becoming a city people can't afford to live in anymore, largely due to the speculation market that comes in, buys up real estate in some other place, and folks can get access to it. And so one of the things the city commissioner, we passed the inclusionary housing ordinance. So if developments of 50 or more, you got to include the inclusionary housing units in those developments. The state, you're completely right, have been raiding the trust fund and putting it someplace else on their own pet projects. We've got to make sure that we fully fund the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, make it available for developers around the state, but also for housing authorities and other affordable housing developers to get access to it. That's an important ingredient in our state, and it could hugely impact the number of affordable housing units that are available. But I should also say that your local government comes into big play here, right? Because we're the ones who set land regulation policy. We are the ones who expand or decrease urban services area. We're the ones who actually have ability at a very local, hyper-local level to create policies that incentivize the development of more affordable housing in our communities.
Going through our county right now.
No, I think it's just both ways.
Level is going to the county level.
That's right.
So yeah.
So I guess what I would say that we all got to be at the dance. The local governments and the local communities also have to be prepared to pass more aggressive policies around affordable housing access, and the state has to do its part by making sure those vouchers and that money stays intact for its intended purpose. It is no accident that they're not running out of money. We've had a surplus, right? What they're doing is it's a program they don't believe in. They don't think they ought to have any role in it, right? The free market ought to be the free market. It's what they believe, without any regulation impeding it or impacting it whatsoever. I believe differently. I believe there's a role that government plays here, especially when we're left to the market conditions and market forces. I just have to remind us, circa 2007, 2008, 2009, and the years that followed, where we believed in that hands-off, laissez-faire approach to economic issues. And so I think it's a dangerous place, but it is not built out of any accident or any need to pay for something else because there isn't any money. It's because it's a program they largely don't believe in. I believe in it, and we would fully fund it. I saw your hand first, sir, at the very back.
Very quickly, I saw you at the Progressive Caucus over in Tampa. You knocked it out of the park here, and I see you're in the habit of doing that. I make about $600 a week. I'm not a rich guy. How can I give you $100 today?
Well, that's a good question. Well, first of all, I'm going to answer this in a broader context, which is there's no way I can run this race without the resources. Of the 50 states and the 50 governors, we got to know that those governors are not necessarily the ones that are most experienced or best healed and best qualified. It's usually the ones that had access to resources. And so we've got to be able to generate resources. So one way to do it is you can go online to our website, andrewgillum.com, where we can take money there. You can also do it today here in this room. We're also trying to get